Okay, we're on.
No. I think it says live at the bottom of my screen, so I assume we're live. So, hi guys, Steve and Evan down under. Good to see you guys again.
Good to see you, Michael, as always.
Definitely,
mate.
I was going to start today's discussion by asking you some questions, and hopefully you share some of your infinite wisdom and research that you've done down under in Australia and your surrounding parts of the world. One of the things I wanted to bring up are those incredible carvings, petroglyphs, and the writing at Kariong.
Mm-hmm.
Not too far from Sydney. It's about an hour's drive, if I recall. I've been very privileged to be there twice, and I would love you to take me and remind me of the site and those that'll be watching this. Because in my opinion, this is probably one of the most important ancient sites in Australia. It provides physical proof that the Egyptians or some descendants or ancestors of the Egyptians were in Australia, who knows. And I'd love to ask you what you know and what your latest info.
He froze. Oh, okay, we nearly got there. It was going well. I'll wait for him to come back. Okay, yeah. Leah's going to fix that up. Don't worry. We can always edit it later. Yeah. It was going well.
It was.
Don't worry, I'm going to cut the whole front. Sorry. I'm going to cut the first couple of minutes, so don't worry. Just remember to start when he comes back.
Mm-hmm. So I don't pick it up from where Michael asked?
What was that, sorry?
Will I pick up that part that Michael said? That'll be in there already, so we just pick it up from there?
Well, I was thinking of just starting from the whole thing again because we're only 2 minutes in, or whenever he gets back. So when he cut, it was 1 minute and 50 seconds in. So we could just start from the top again really quick.
All right.
And I'm just giving, yeah. Evan, can you just make sure, check your WhatsApp just in case if he is messaging you there?
You're so used to this, Leah. It happens every time.
It's okay.
Logging in now, just very slow. Oh, no, so that was from 8:03, so that was from the first time I was logging in.
Oh, right.
That started off really well.
It did?
Yeah, it was doing well, and then it just sort of... Okay. So, Michael, if you could switch to your phone data to tether your device to the internet if it's a connection issue. But before you do that, I'm going to re-invite you back into the chat again. Okay. So, yeah, I'll do that right now. Okay. Just give it a minute.
Yeah, good idea, Carrie. I never thought about that. We are going to be doing that. Yeah.
All right, so I re-invited.
Okay.
There we go. Perfect.
Oh, way back.
Excellent. We can see you, and next question is, can we hear you?
I'm
not. Well, hang on, he's frozen again. No, he's.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
That's pretty good.
It's getting better.
All right, so this is obviously a internet problem on my side.
Yeah. Maybe.
Seems so. Can you not hear me? Can you guys hear me and see me?
We're hearing you pretty good now. The vision's like there's a little bit of fuzz on the vision, but we can hear him well, can't we? Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, I think we're okay. Just refresh the page.
You want us to refresh?
Oh, you want this, don't you? That page is all right, isn't it?
Michael, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. No, okay. So you could. Oh my goodness, I thought no one could hear anybody.
No, we can hear everyone. Yeah, we're good.
Shall we?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry. All right. No worries. All right. So, yeah, if we could just start from the top, I'll cut this front part off. And if you guys can please start from the top again, I do apologize about that. So, yeah, I'm going to mute myself and then we'll continue.
All right, we'll wait for the number to come in again, won't we?
No, the number's still
Oh,
good
we're
from
on.
last time. So we just restart.
Just start talking. It's okay.
All right, okay. Well, Michael, do you want to ask that question again, and I'll try and answer it this time.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so hello to another chat with Stephen Evan Strong and myself, Michael Tellinger, Australia, talking to South Africa, sharing some important information and discoveries of our hidden history and the hidden origins of humankind. And in this episode, I'd like to ask Stephen Evan to share some of their knowledge and information about one of my favorite places in Australia, and those are the Gosford Glyphs or Carryong site. You can correct me if I got the names wrong, but this is absolutely brilliant evidence of the presence of Egyptians or more recent descendants of the Egyptians, or possibly the ancestors of the Egyptians that were present in Australia. And that site not too far from Sydney is just spectacular. I was fortunate to be there twice, and I would love you to just share the information that you have about the site, because I know that you've done a lot of research, you've had it transcribed and deciphered. So please share with those that will be watching this video about this amazing place and the meaning. I would actually love to hear from you what the story and the message is in those Gosford glyphs, those Egyptian hieroglyphs in Australia.
Love to. It's interesting that you brought that up. As I said before, Michael, the glyphs right now are under threat from developers, and it's a real big issue. In Australia, as you probably know, we've been destroying our sites, and this one, well, what can you say about it? It was originally 3 walls that had a complete ceiling of rock above it, and the 3rd wall still had part of the ceiling there. The other 2 walls have sort of collapsed into the center. And what do we have on those 3 walls? We have about 320 glyphs. Now, the glyphs themselves are Proto-Egyptian, and which is really important, Michael, and I'll explain why, because Proto-Egyptian was the first form of hieroglyph, and it really wasn't discovered probably until Ray Johnson got there. Yeah. When he got to the glyphs, he actually worked with a lady called Dr. Abba Dia Ghazi, who was head of what then?
Cairo Library.
Yeah, and together they put together, I've got it, it's 4,200 signs and symbols that make up Proto-Egyptian. Now, people need to understand that. I need to put that out at the start there, because really, until about 2003, 2005, really no one knew much about it. Now, I have to tell you that the government has told us, and the government are always right, because they've told us that it's a fake. And they've been clever about this, Michael. They've given us a series of anonymous fakers. Number one, they said it was a deranged Czech, wasn't it?
Yeah, deranged Czech.
He was found in 1975, I think, wandering through the walls with a chisel in his hand. No book. Don't forget, in 1975, no one knew what Proto-Egyptian was, but he didn't have a book because there wasn't one. He didn't have a ladder, didn't have a hammer, he just had a chisel. And the story was a person from National Parks and Wildlife found him there, sent him on his way and scolded him a bit, and that was the end of it. And that's who did it. And what you saw...
Well, that sounds like we've solved it. Why is everybody jumping up and down?
And by the way, no name was given. No name was ever given. But don't worry, Michael, it's also been claimed in 1962. Some students from Sydney Uni went and did it. in their spare time. But there are two problems with that, Michael. Number one, nobody in Sydney Uni teaches hieroglyphs, and no one's ever given it as a course. So what they're telling us is some students in their spare time during their holiday, when they had nothing better to do, they went off and spent weeks camping in the bush creating a fake set of glyphs. Now, I want you to think about that for a sec. Sydney Uni are off in the bush creating what? A hoax.
Yeah.
Lovely ethics being taught in Sydney Uni, isn't it? Wonderful. Righto, kiddies. I see you're doing maths and you're doing engineering. We'll send you off to the bush and we'll get you to write a 1962 Proto-Egyptian. And these are, by the way, what I've just given you, Michael, are the two official stances from the government. And that basically what they've said. Now, the truth is something completely different. What we found was when Dr. Abadi Higazi and Ray Johnson read that, the first panel, which is the one that's the far one up the top, we believe is definitely Egyptian. No doubt. Because I got the book from Minnie Mace, Ray Johnson's book, and I spent months going through all 4,100 of them and compared them to every glyph. And in that first panel, we have a 92% match up with Proto-Egyptian. And in it...
Now, the panel that you're referring to, I recall the place that you come from the car park and walk up through the trees. You go past that beautiful old tree, the grandmother's tree or something like that.
That's what it's called.
Right? Yeah, and past that, and then you go down this little path, and then you drop down in between these two rock faces, and go further uphill between them, and they're covered in these Egyptian hieroglyphs, and you go through them. And so when you say the first panel, if you go into the site from the direction that I've described, which side is it that you're referring to?
Right up the top, just before you clamber up to the shaft around the back. It's right up the top as we clamber up there. It's that one that was hidden. And what you'll find when you look very carefully at it, which I have many, many times, the size and the cutting on that panel is different to the other two panels. It's really obvious to me that these were done, and even the people who claim it's a hoax will say, oh, it was done by two different people. So there's a difference between the two panels. Now, we believe that first panel is, and even in it, you can find a proper cartouche that says Nefer Djeb, one of the two sons of Khufu. So we believe, and that one talks about two boats being wrecked, and the original story around this verifies all of this, and they were stranded there. And what it also says is that Nefer Teru...
So two boats, did you say
two Egyptian
boats that were stranded there?
Yes, it's got there, two boats that were stranded there, and I know that is the story of the elder. He spoke about two boats, and that's what Nani Bev spoke about. They were wrecked, the boats were stranded, and what then happened is Nefer Teru, according to the panel, went westward for 2 seasons, which is quite weird because, and I think I know where they were going. I think they were after the ring, and we'll get to that later. I think they were after the Atlantean ring that was buried at Hill End, which is on 33 degrees, and so is Carrion. Anyway, he went westward for 2 seasons and then was bitten by a snake twice and died. We believe, because Auntie Minnie Mace with Ray Johnson went there the first time, and Auntie Minnie Mace picked up 2 objects which he gave to me. One was a bone. That bone has been looked at by the Lismore Base Hospital, and they've told me it is a bone, it's ancient, and it's human.
And it's the kind of top of the leg.
It's the femur bone. Yeah. And then there was a second object that she gave to me that she found at the shaft, because there's a 10-metre shaft there where we think he was buried. And that one we've had analysed by the top laboratory in Australia. And it is 73% aluminium, 3% copper, and 24% no metal on this planet. Now, what's really interesting is, 73% aluminium, 3% copper. What's interesting is, in Egypt, they don't have bauxite and aluminium. So it's really an enigma. This particular piece of jewelry has a clasp, a circular clasp on the top. On one side smooth, and the other side has got someone kneeling down. She gave it to me as protection, but when I analysed it, both the scientists said, we don't know what's in there. and we can't identify it. And this guy is the top, probably he's got one of the top laboratories in the country. It's inside a museum, and he's got 38 scientists working for him. So he's not just someone off the street. So she gave us that. So what that tells us, Michael, is definitely we've got Egyptian there, but I think there's more to it. And what we find is go past that first panel, 92%, a story about the two ships, one being bitten by a snake, buried, the whole business. We've got that. And then what we've got, and by the way, I should make this point too, we have found a second set of glyphs hundreds of meters away. Now remember, all the fakes were supposed to be between those walls, not in other places. And by the way, we have got some people, I only got this off Nina this afternoon, they found more glyphs.
Oh, really? I've heard rumors of that.
No, we found them.
Sorry, hold on. This is brand new information, Steve. So you found a new set of glyphs, what, 150 meters away?
These are 150, and then there's another set we've just found today. The 150 are very important because in that is all Proto-Egyptian. There's one panel of a scorpion and then a symbol for the pharaoh, and that could be his totem. And on the other side, it's got a series there. It's got the coffin there. It says death, and then it marks something out of very important two things. Number one is a marker, which is the staff that either the pharaoh or the son of the pharaoh carries to the afterlife. And next to it is the most important glyph on these ones, it's 150 away. It is a glyph that says back door or back shaft. And that is where we found the bone, in that back shaft. So what we have is we found two sets of glyphs. And by the way, this writing was half the size of the other writing and not as deep. It was done by a third person to tell us where the burial was. Now when we get to the two main walls that you know, this is where it gets interesting, Michael. Because I found there the Proto-Egyptian matchup was 42%. Now, when some experts were begrudgingly sent from Sydney Uni, who have never done hieroglyphs and knew nothing about Proto-Egyptian, they did it in 1982, they said two things. Number one, that panel has stuff that is not Egyptian. Well, they were right about that. Laird Scranton claims most of this Dogon. And it's worth bearing in mind that the road we were walking on is called Bambara, and Bambara are the neighbouring tribe of the Dogon. Dogon, roughly not Dogon. So anyway, we think, and I asked Arnie Bev, who, as you know, is the last full descent Darkingon elder, and she told us that the Egyptians learnt their hieroglyphs from us, and that was our writing. And those two panels were our writing, and when the Egyptians came, they put another panel up on the far side. And as you know, directly above that is a star map, which has been measured and it's been dated at 4,600 years, isn't it?
Yeah, they even got the date, the day.
They even got the day down to the minute. That was dated at 12 o'clock at night, and they gave it at 2,500 BC, which happens to be the time that Khufu was alive, which makes me think that particular panel up the top is celebrating the Egyptians coming here, because that was the beginning of the Egyptians staying here from 4,600 years to 400 years ago. That part I've got off different elders. They left 400 years ago when they broke the law here. So what do we have on those other panels? We think we've seen stuff there that's Dogon. We've seen stuff there that is probably Babylonian. We believe that is their first language that spread around the world. And we believe that particular, and there's another point that's very important with this too. There was something that Eric von Däniken picked up when he went there, which was interesting. But what he did say, and a very valid point, he pointed to some of the lichen. He said, see that lichen there? He said, that's hundreds of years old. What is it doing growing between the actual panels there if it is hundreds of years old? He said, it's not. He said, I can't believe that any scientist that has a degree would even make a statement like that. This is far older than that. So what we found from this is that this is a very sacred site, one of the most sacred sites in the country. And it's very interesting. I want to make a point about this while I can, Michael, that I've taken quite a few people to that particular site, a lot. And the people who had the most reaction with that and I believe really did, let's say, please the spirits, maybe even more than that, made you feel very welcome, was you. I remember when you came, you reacted so much to that grandmother tree that you really did get locked in with that. And I know that you sensed that site was very important. You could see it. We had bird signs when you came. We've had that a few times. But the site itself, I can tell you this, that the person who was how can I put this? He was the Aboriginal Sites Officer. He knew about this in the 1970s, Michael. And he knew because the whole of National Parks and Wildlife were talking about it. And they were saying, we don't want the effing Egyptians here. What are we going to do about it? You know, what he did was he took in a site that he'd found. He said, look at this site. Oh, take us to it. Take us to it. He said, no, not going to do it until you show me this Egyptian thing. No, we're not going to show you. He told us, we've got this film, by the way, so if people don't believe this, it's true. And then what he did was he said, well, I'm not showing you this site. And finally they said, all right, we're going to take you there under 3 conditions. Number 1, we're going to take you late in the evening. Number 2, if you tell anyone about this, you're losing your job. You're not to tell a soul. He said, all right, okay, fine. So they took him there, 1978. And by the way, if you look at the records, National Parks and Wildlife said they didn't see it till 1982. That's a lie. They did see it. It gets worse. He took him there, and what he said was this: couldn't see a thing. We just saw some glyphs right up the top, about 4 meters high. The whole of this thing. Now, remember, the main thing is Deranged Check, 1975. They're there 3 years later. He said there was so much material had fallen in there.
Like sticks, rocks.
The whole thing. He had a gang of 6, and it took him 2 days to clear it out. But the story is that 3 years before, someone's walking through there with a chisel in their hand, and they could walk through there freely. He said there was 30 years of rubbish that had fallen in there. So they cleaned the whole thing out. What happened to David Fitzgerald was that he told people, started telling people, they said, don't tell anyone. So what National Parks and Wildlife did, and I'm going to say this in public because we know it's true, they got some money together and gave it to a person in National Parks and Wildlife who was second in charge. It was a slush fund to destroy the site. And her job was to destroy the whole place. And I was told by David at one stage they were going to line up the Commonwealth government to use it for artillery range and blow it up. But the problem was, as they started to do that, the person given the money kept making up reasons not to do it, and then the public found it. And it became found. So they had to make up a new story because they were going to destroy it. So the story was, okay, let's make one up. So they made up this story. And what they said was, this Alan Dash, who was working for the Gosford City Council, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He's the one who found him. And he put up the statement. And by the way, Michael, about a month later, he got a job with National Parks and Wildlife. And he still has it to this day. Just a coincidence. I don't know how that came about. But what they had to do is they realised then they couldn't destroy it. So now what we'll do is we'll just create a gathering of different stories about people who faked it, but none of them have a name. None of them have a stat deck. Now, what I have is a stat deck in 1958 from a woman who was taken there by who was the Secretary of National Parks and Wildlife at the time, had a different name. And the uncle told her, this is an Egyptian site, but don't tell anyone. And I've got her stat deck. I've got her name. What do they have? They've got rumours of people who did it, but they've got no name, and they've got no one there to stand there and said it was me. We've got people who said I was there before then. So the site is very important because it chronicles the fact the Egyptians were in Australia for 4,200 years. What it also tells us is the Egyptians sailed around the world. And the way the world before it was here, we don't even begin to understand what was going on. The whole of this planet was populated. No one, we all know this is true. And we knew that there were times when they had technology the equal of ours. What we've got here is Egyptians in Australia for 4,200 years. They know about it. You probably also know we had, what was his name? Muhammad who?
Oh, Ibrahim.
Muhammad Ibrahim did a translation on it and pointed out grammar that is only of the highest level, and he's got a degree in hieroglyphs, and he was going to come to Australia, wasn't he, Evan?
Yes.
Yes, he was. He was going to come to Australia, and he was going to do talks with us, and we were going to bring in someone who knew about Egyptology. So what happened, Michael? He made an application to come to Australia. By the way, this gentleman has a job in the university. He has a family. His family also does tours, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
He's very rich. The government of Australia wouldn't let him in. They said he was a terrorist risk. They said when he got here, he was going to flee into the country with the backpackers and then perhaps make a bomb and blow us up. So he could not get into the country, but he could get into virtually any other country in the world, but not Australia. And it's not because he was a terrorist risk. It's because he had a PhD in hieroglyphs. And he said it's legitimate. He said this is an elegant form of Proto-Egyptian and the best we've ever seen anywhere in the world. They don't have any panel as big as this. They have it on pottery. I think Laird Scranton found some pottery with it in 2005.
2005, yeah.
Yeah. Found it on pottery. And there we found one of the other things.
So hold on, you found what on pottery? This similar kind of Proto-Egyptian writing?
Exactly the same. And more importantly, Michael, one of the things they said about the reason why it was fake is they said the cartouches, by the way, they're not cartouches, they're Syrex. They didn't even get that right. But they were right about this. The animals were facing the wrong way. And they said, well, they've done 8 of them. They made the mistake 8 times. It's obviously a fake. Laird found the pottery, and in the pottery, their Syrex, not their cartouches, are always reversed because it's Thoth's wisdom, which is written back the front. All of the Syrex are reversed, and we've got 8 of them, and they're all reversed correctly. But the first cartouche is the right way around, and that was written by Egyptians. The other ones, the ones that are not on that panel, have long rectangular pieces where the animals are facing one way and all the others are facing the other way. And of course they said, well, it's a fake. Well, it's not. That's the way they did Proto-Egyptian. And all credit to Laird Scranton, because that was one of the things they said was wrong with it. So we disproved all of that. We now know. And we found another set of glyphs I've spoken about, and we've only just discovered. We've got Nina and others going out tomorrow.
So
I won't say where it is yet, but I'm hoping within a couple of weeks, because I'm working with Nina at the moment. I only found out this afternoon. If we can find 3 sets of glyphs that are set up all over the place, we can forget all these stories about fakes. We can forget them. It is true. They were here. They came here. My elders have told me that too. The Egyptians were here for quite some time, and they left here 400 years ago when they broke the law. They came. I've got an elder called Walangari. Yeah. He's Pitch and Jack Jara, and they know this story because 400 years ago, because the Egyptians were coming all this time, but you've got to remember, 400 years ago, it's not the same type of Egyptian that came way back, okay? We've got different people. There's another religion involved, and these people aren't as empathetic. They went to Pitch and Jack Jara country, and they stole 4 rocks. And as you know, Michael, the original people are very precious with their rocks. They tracked them all the way back to Sydney, and on a beach there, they killed a lot of them. And because at that stage, we didn't have repeating rifles, and they told the Egyptians never to come back. And that was the end of that 4,200-year liaison between the two groups, because they broke the law. So primarily, those glyphs are, I think, one of the most important sites in Australia and one of the most important sites in the world, because it changes our history completely. It changes everything because it tells us.
Well, what it does, it just truly supports and underlines how little we know about our history, how our history books are just fairy tales rewritten by politicians, leaders, emperors, and pharaohs, and whoever wants to take control and rewrites the history according to their agenda. And this just shows us how little we know. And I'm just so excited to hear that from you. But I want to ask you a little bit more about the second site that you say you found about 150 meters away, because that's obviously, if there's a second site, there might be a third site. and who knows? So maybe that's an area that's just filled with these ancient hieroglyphs that tell us a completely different story. But can you, without divulging the location of this other site, obviously, could you just give me a bit more insight into what there is at the second site? What
Yeah.
kind of right?
There are 16 glyphs there, and we do know that a stone chisel. Oh, is that going a bit? Oh, no, sorry. A stone chisel was picked up by Dr. Hans Dieter von Senf,
Yeah.
and we've seen a picture of it, and it was dropped at the bottom. And what we know from that, Michael, is we believe that was not created the same way as the ones inside the glyphs. We have a strong feeling. Uncle Jerry told me, I've had a couple of elders told me when I asked how was that made, and they both said the same thing. They said, have you heard of lasers? I said, yeah. He said, you try and take a chisel and hit that particular thing there. If you hit it, it'll crumble. And you've seen some of the marks there where we've got perfect circles that go around like that, and you haven't got a straight line with a chisel. It's a perfect line. But the one we're talking about, there are 16 glyphs in there in two passages. The first one, unfortunately, some idiot scribbled over the top. They scratched it in again. And that one, I believe, is the name of Neferturu. The second set has primarily what it is, Michael, it's got a points. And if you look at where it points, if you were to walk in that line, you would go straight to the shaft. I think what it is, it's a memorial to, oh, and there's one amazing thing above it, isn't there, Evan?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd only been
Oh,
like
man.
a gazillion times.
Oh,
and
yeah.
someone and that saw the video went, what about that thing?
Yeah, so I've been there about 6 times, Michael, and someone said when they watched the video, they said, what's that thing above there? And I said, what are you talking about? I went back there. Am I blind? Above it.
Yeah, it happens. Isn't that great though? But it happens all the time. It just happened to me the other day. You can go to the same site 20 times and then you just don't see it until either somebody points something out to you from a video or you see it yourself. But it's just incredible how even as experienced as one gets going to explore the field and the nature out there. So what did you find? Tell me.
Oh, mate, it was unbelievable. This far above the writing, there's a hole. It's like a sphere, right? And it goes straight in. And I've got sticks. I've had sticks this long, a meter. I've pushed them in. It keeps going. Now, what I know about this particular site, it's set up in a way that the water runs over the top of this but doesn't touch it. There's a ledge that comes out. It can't be caused by water. It can't be caused by anything. It's sandstone, perfect circle, and you just keep pushing in and pushing in. It just goes in. It's only this wide, but it goes down at least 1.5 meters. I cannot find the end of it. And I'm talking about a cliff, aren't I, Evan?
Yes.
A massive cliff, and there's not a hole anywhere in the whole cliff. It's in the wrong place. It's not caused by chemical forms. It's not caused by erosion. It's not caused by water. Someone has put a hole straight through there, and it just goes in and in and in, and we've never been able to find it. We've never been able to get to the end of it. So what we've found from that is that particular thing, when the other elders tell me we use laser, I'm looking at a hole that goes into a solid sandstone cliff, at least 1 meter, and it's no more than 5 centimeters wide, and it continues 5 centimeters all the way along. Now, you tell me how original people that have a stick, stone, and bone toolkit could ever do that. And the answer is it is utterly impossible. And, of course, as you said, Michael, I had been at that site so many times and so proud that we found it. Until that person pointed out, I went back there and put a stick in there and thought, what am I doing? But like you said, Michael, when we go there, I don't know, you're sort of looking for things that you know are there and you just don't see it. So I get a big cross for that one, and I give a big tip to the person who picked it up and pointed out something I was looking at. But what I'm seeing there, Michael, I'm picking up an artifact that's 24% made of metal not on this planet. I'm looking at a hole that goes in 1 meter, 1.5 meters, maybe 3 meters. I'm looking at a tunnel that is 10 meters long that runs right up to the glyphs. It was made alongside there. And I'm asking myself, you're trying to tell me that this was done by people who just pick up a branch, pick up a stick, and pick up a rock, and that's all they've got. And they did this. They couldn't do it. You couldn't make what's on those glyphs you couldn't do it with a chisel. And who was that Chase? Who was that guy from Gaia that came? Billy Carson's.
Billy Carson.
He picked up something I didn't pick up again. He said, look at these 6 glyphs. They're all in exactly the same line. How do you get that symmetry when you're just blindly coming in here? And I said to him, oh, good pickup. I thought that too. I was thinking, oh, geez, I didn't even see that too. I feel like, what am I doing in
Billy,
here? How am I shut?
Billy is great. I got to know Billy quite well over the last few years on my tours to the USA. And Billy has got a really keen eye. He can pick up stuff very quickly. He's a really good researcher and good investigator. I like Billy a lot.
Well, he's filmed the whole thing, and it should be out very soon, mate. He did a half-hour show on it. He came across America just to do the glyphs.
Because he heard about when he was in Egypt, he heard about a prince bringing back the remains of his brother, but from a distant land.
He'd heard that story, and they did bring him back. They took him home because when we got the only thing that was left in that tunnel where he was buried for a while, that's why they put that marker, I think, to get that. They were going to bring him back. All that was left, because everyone's looked for his grave and they've looked for all that was left, Minnie Mason, Ray Johnson found it, was one piece of bone. Now, where's the rest of the bones? Just the top of the femur bone there and that one piece of jewelry. I would say as they brought it up, it's dropped in the dirt, they've missed it, and the rest has been taken home. Because Billy said they'd heard that they brought it from some country in the south somewhere. It was from here. And it was Nefertari. He died here. And what it means is, Michael, that you've got to remember, Australia has never signed a treaty with the original people. We have seen the treaty, the Egyptian treaty. Tracy Smith has it, and we've seen it. And I read stories that when Philip came here, an original person came up and presented this treaty to him and said, we have a treaty, go away. But you know what the British are like when they move in somewhere, mate? Once they get there, you can't get them out.
No.
I was in contact with someone that must have been her great grandmother or whatever. When the British came, this lady walked up to them and basically spoke Portuguese, Spanish, French, all these different languages to work out which one are you. All the rest have been here and they went for all these different languages. No. Yeah.
Well, there's a story about Elkin when he was in the Kimberley region. He ran into original people he'd never met before, and there were people from neighbouring tribes when they used their lingo and they couldn't talk to them. And then the elders, these people that have never been to a school in their life, started doing Masonic signs to him. And then he started signing back because he was a Mason too. And they started having sign language conversations between original people, right, and Elkin. Now, Elkin was a Mason, and he wrote about it. He actually said, these guys were signing to me. We could communicate. We didn't use language. We just signed to each other. So
can you explain to people that don't know who Elkin is, who he was and how he gets in?
He was actually the first professor of anthropology of any university in Australia, and it was Sydney Uni. So he was an academic, and he was chosen by Sydney Uni to begin anthropology in this country. So I can assure you, he wasn't just any old archaeologist walking down the street. He was chosen by Sydney Uni to start archaeology in this country. He was considered one of the top academics, and probably the top academic when it comes to Aboriginal works. And
there's a seminal book that he wrote called Aboriginal Men of High Degree.
Oh, yeah.
So definitely recommend people get their hands on that one.
He said that they were magic. They could do magic, and he saw it. So he wasn't empathetic. He was the first one that was probably empathetic towards blackfellas. It was 1930. So therefore, when I say this guy said he saw Masons doing this, remember, he then got a job with Sydney Uni to run anthropology there. So he's not just anyone. And he made this very clear. So we've got these stories floating all around. Egyptians have been here. To be honest, for us, Michael, we're so used to that part of the story now that we sort of feel like, well, it's just such an obvious one. And you know what else we found, Michael? We went through research in the 1930s and 1920s, and you'll find that every newspaper in Australia was talking about Egyptians in Australia. Every one of them. It was common knowledge.
Wow.
Oh, it was
Wow.
everywhere. So Grafton Elliott Smith, who was the first Australian academic to be given a knighthood for academia, we read a passage he wrote in 1910 when he said there is more Egyptian archaeology in Australia than there is in Egypt. He said it's everywhere. So I can give another example. What was it? Sir Ralph Sorrento looked at the mummification that took place at Darnley Island, and he said it is exactly the same as what they did between the 23rd to the 27th dynasty.
Yeah.
Exactly the same. They've got the same boat that's rowed out. A crocodile judges them on. It was exactly the same. Things were pulled out through the nose. We pulled the brain out through the nose. We did 21 different forms of mummification in Australia. And people think the Egyptians taught us anything. No, they came here way back at the start, and they knew about pyramids and they knew about all that stuff. But when it comes to magic and stuff like that, that's why they came here. That's what we had.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important thing there about this word called magic, and the magi and so forth. The fact that magic and wizardry and sorcery was something that was well accepted and recognized throughout human history, and then at a certain point that was removed from our consciousness, from our ability by those that to control of the world, so that people start disbelieving in it, and slowly but surely they created a species with amnesia. We can't remember that part of our history, and whatever history books have been written about it, or so-called mythology, which is just written and oral tradition and history of humankind. So this so-called mythology is obviously relegated to the realms of fiction and imagination, while this is really part of our human history. Pretty much all of what becomes evident to people like you and me, I guess, over it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. The moment you start exploring ancient human history and origins of humankind, is that so-called mythology is actually a relatively accurate depiction of human history. And mythology is probably a lot closer to what happened in the world than what we read in our modern sanitized history books, out of which all the real activities and the terrible truth that went down on our planet over hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years, how that sanitization process took place. And slowly but surely over the last few hundred years, they've edited all the books, removed all the truth, all the hidden history, and present us with this completely sanitized and cleaned up history of our planet, history of our species. And we got no bloody idea what's going on. And this is just a continuation of what you're discovering. There is a continuation of shining a light on how mysterious and crazy and unexpected and mind-blowing the history of the world, the history of the human race is.
It's interesting you said that, because the presentation we're doing next, we're going to talk about a person called Kano. I can't say his last name because he's passed on. And what we're going to do, I'm involving an elder from the Ramangeri. Two Ramangeri people are going to speak about this guy, and I'm going to speak about him too. And the reason we're going to make a major issue about Kano is because he was a person who actually did magic in front of people often. And that's all we're going to talk about. I'm going to play tennis with Darren tomorrow, and we're going to make sure we don't tell the same magic stories. And I'd like to tell you at least one now. And it's actually one, if you ever run into Graham Hancock, he'll back you up because he was there when it happened. Graham, as you know, anyone that comes out here, I take them on country. You know that. I'm happy to take them anywhere they want to go. Graham went out for quite some time. And on the last day, I said to him, look, I'll take you on country, because he was around for a while. I said, but you've got to go on to somewhere and meet an elder. And he did. He met Kano. And you were there, weren't you, Evan? Evan was there. And there was about 8 or 10 of us there. And we were sitting around at the time. We're around a fire pit. And I was making some tea and a few things turned up. And Kano turned up out of nowhere, done up old way. He's got the paint across here, lap, paint down here, and he's singing songs. He's singing songs in first language too. And, of course, nobody knows what he's singing. He did the whispering song. You know that one. And then every now and then he'd speak in English. And we're all sitting around watching while he's doing this, and he's talking a bit about different stuff about culture. And then he stopped. And this is where it got weird. He walked back one step. We're all watching him, all watching. There's about 10 of us there. Then he walks back the second step. He's gone. Completely gone. No one can see him. I looked around. I think Evan looked around at Graham Hancock, and I can tell you, mate, Graham was speechless, and that doesn't happen too often with him. All he had was a huge mouth open. He didn't know what was going on. Mine was no different. And I wasn't going to ask Kano what he did, because anytime I've asked him a question, he asked me a question, I can't answer it. So I wasn't going to do it. Anyway, he's gone. And then about 5 seconds later, he reappears behind Christine, didn't he?
Yeah.
Massive smile on his face because he knows he's really got us. We're just all gone. I didn't ask him, but someone asked him the next day, and this is what I wanted to tell people, because what you said is exactly what this came out of it. Someone came up to him, to Kano, and said, "How did you do that, Kano?" And he looked at him and he said, "What?" He said, "Oh, come on, you know what I mean." He said, "Oh, that." He said, "Don't you realize what I did, every human on this planet has the ability to do?" He said, "I just know how to step around the curtain. You don't yet." He said, "All of us can do this. The only difference is that I didn't lose it, but you did." He said, "There's nothing special about it." And I remember later when Kano passed on, I spoke to Wirchin about it, and I asked him some more about it. And he called it the same thing. He said, "You mean that party trick?" I said, "Oh, Wirchin, it's more than that." He said, "No, it's not. How does that help anyone by disappearing in front of all of us? It doesn't give us food or anything. It's just a game he plays with us. He does that sort of stuff all the time." And this is the trick with this. I could probably spend half an hour telling you stories like that from the same person. Now, the reason we were going to highlight him is because that's our future. You're right, Michael. They stole it off us. They stole it off us because if you even go back into recent history, you're going to run into names like Nostradamus and Merlin. Now, why did these guys get tolerated in the royal court unless they functioned? If they couldn't do what they said they could do, you know what they do to them? They kill them. Why'd they keep them there? I mean, Nostradamus told the king how he was going to die. He was told they were going to put a lance through his head, and that's exactly how he died. These guys were still magic then, and that was only, 1,000 years ago. This was where we were. And what Kano did, and that's why we want to really spend some time talking about him in a lot of detail. I want people to understand what he said was true. We could all do the stuff he does. I mean, when I talk to Darren tomorrow, we're going to run off which ones he's doing and which ones I'm doing. And we're going to try and make it clear to people is that there is a prophecy with the original people. I've told you before, they believe at Uluru this year, they're going to change the planet. And what we're going to come back to is people like Kano as our leaders, because the leaders we have today, they're not going to help us. They're not going to do anything for us. They've been lying to us now for so long. So, yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's all coming down. I believe 2020 is the big year. It's going to come down, and if Uncle Donald has his way in the USA, it'll open the doors for the real truth to come down. Well, first of all, the global leaders that are the puppets of the global banking empire are going to be removed, and that'll then open the doors to the real truth coming out. And again, I always say, the One Small Town strategy has all the solutions encoded in it for all the problems we face as the human race. And the same goes for exposing the truth. Because once people live in communities where they have no fear, no worry of survival, they can express their natural talents and their skills and their gifts. The entire community does everything they can for the benefit of the community. There is no need for lying, for secrets, for no suppression of technology and healthcare and cures for disease. So all that stuff will come out. Not only the technology with energy, with petroleum, with levitation, but technology with healing and cures for all disease, and all the sound-based and resonance-based healing and cures. And then also the information about the truth about our origins, the truth about the genetic cloning, the truth about all these things that have been removed from our sanitized history books. So, but there's one other thing I wanted to bring up before we finish here today, because it's coming up to an hour already.
Yeah, ship division.
There's a story about that this little grandmother told, that came to Australia. She's that young girl that's known as Little Grandmother, and she came to Australia, and she went out with some of the original people that took her out in somewhere in the middle of it may be close to Uluru, if I'm not mistaken. And they took her to this ancient site that they never take anybody to, and she climbed into what she describes as a hollow rock, quite a large hollow rock that she climbed into, and the entire hollow rock was covered in hieroglyphs. Do you know anything about this? It's obviously a different site from the Gosford glyphs, but that's obviously a very important site, and I'd love to hear any of your thoughts on that.
Look, mate, there's an island, isn't there, up on Cape York, and there is a full set of glyphs there too. And the story is, we heard about this, and what happened was they called in some academics, right, and they said, we're going to show it to you. And they shouldn't have done it, but it's okay, because what happened was they got to the island, right? They got the boats ready for the island, and the boats wouldn't go. None of the boats would start. And these guys were trying to fix the boats, and they turned around, and guess what? All the blackfellas have walked away. They knew that they shouldn't have been there. Now, I know people have told me about that, and that particular place, there's a cave in there which has hundreds of glyphs, thousands perhaps. It's massive. We know about that one. We know there are some in the centre. I can tell you, Michael, that we've been asked to go and become part of this ceremony that's taking place on the 21st there, which a lot of the elders were involved in. And look, there are things in the middle there. I know that Walangari told me about a rock they've got, a scarab rock that has scarab Egyptian writing on one side, and on the top it has cuneiform. So there's a lot of things in the middle, mate. There's a lot of things. And the thing is, because when the whites came here, they had such a poor relationship with the original people, they just never showed them. They're sitting on it still.
Yeah.
In the middle,
yeah,
I know there's stuff there. There's the stuff up at Cape York. I think you're going to find, it seems to me it's going to come out all over the place. We've now found that other place on the Hawkesbury River they're going to tomorrow. I think we're going to find that stuff is all over this country. And I think now that the original people are getting ready for this change, I think they're going to start bringing this out and showing people. Yeah, she would be right about that. It's there. Yeah.
Well, you just reminded me of the last trip I took to Australia. It's before we did that tour of ours. I went up it's about an 8-hour drive north of Adelaide, out into right out into that part of Australia, and it's near Wilmina Pound.
Yep, Wilmina Pound. Yep.
Wilmina Pound. It's not far from there, I think. But Australia is huge, as everybody knows. So driving around there, you sort of lose your bearings because you can drive for a whole day in one direction, and then we were very honored to be shown by the elders there that invited us. For some reason, they felt they wanted to share that site with me, and this is a site that they never show anybody. So I was asked not to share the site, not to share the location, and not to share the images. I can show 1 or 2 images, but don't say where it is. And it was just spectacular. What blew my mind is that, and there were just thousands of these rock carvings on the stone walls along these canyons and valleys, what in our dry riverbeds. In fact, I think there may have been a stone that we picked up there that we brought back to you, that you then analyzed. It's from that trip, yes. With the lines and the marking. It's from that trip that I recall picking up that stone in one of the dry riverbeds there. But what blew my mind is the similarity between some of the drawings, the pictures, the images carved in the rocks, to the images that we have found here in Southern Africa. It's that blew my mind. It literally was. I felt like I was being transported to some of the sites here in South Africa, and even the style of it looks like whatever techniques they used to carve them into the rocks were the same techniques.
It's a global language, isn't it? The whole world was speaking one language one time, and that would have been a better time than what we've got now. This is what we're finding.
Yeah.
There was a time when was actually what the elders told me. There was a first language. He said, but before that, there was no language. It was all telepathy. And he said, in that particular time, there was no lies, because you can't lie to yourself.
Well, you can't lie to. If I can read your mind, then you can't lie to me, because you can't be thinking what an asshole and telling me what a nice guy I am. And that that's the reason that language was invented. I believe, and I've shared this in many of my lectures, is that when they came down to destroy our language, in fact, that was, I believe, a complete misinterpretation, which we read about in the Sumerian texts. We read the same story in the Bible, and I guess it's repeated in various other ancient cultures. When the gods saw that humanity was growing in consciousness and growing in ability, and they said, oh, wow, look at them. If they can do that, they can become like us. And let us go down and destroy their language. And I think that's what they meant by that, was that people are beginning to communicate telepathically, and they would be able to discover very quickly what was going on with these other beings that they call the gods, that were manipulating, controlling humanity. And keep in mind that if this was the case during the Tower of Babel incident, that's just the other day. That's not a long time ago. So during that period, there were already hundreds, if not thousands, of languages around the world. So it's not as if everybody was speaking the same language. So let us go down and destroy their language so they can't understand each other. No, that's a misinterpretation. People are already talking many other languages. They didn't have to make them speak other languages. That happened already. But what was possibly happening, that a group of people were beginning to evolve to a level where their pituitary gland and their capacity to communicate telepathically was becoming so refined that they were able to communicate telepathically. And I think that's what happened. That's what came down. They mess up our pineal gland and any other parts of our body connected to our ability to communicate telepathically. And that could not happen, because once we could do that, we could become like them, because we could read their minds. We could understand what their thoughts are, their premeditated crimes against humanity, crimes against the species that was cloned and created to be a slave. It's a spectacular moment in human history. And all of the stuff that we're talking about, all of these amazing lies and layers upon layers and layers of deception, and the epochs of layers of deception that we have to work through, all of that is going to be blown away once we have the one small town situation in place, where we can explore, invent, create, manifest anything we imagine, because there's no more need for any fear, any secrets, nothing should be hidden. So all of these things are going to start coming out. So when I talk about one small town having a solution for all the human problems, one of the great solutions it's going to provide is a solution for uncovering all the lies and deception throughout all of human history, because all that fear mongering, all the suppression of knowledge and technology will be removed, and we will start breaking through these layers of ancient deception. And that's going to be equally as exciting as making new discoveries in technology and healthcare and so forth. Rediscovering who we really are and where we really come from is going to be equally exciting for everyone to wrap their heads around. But I must say, I think it's going to be very scary for a lot of people. So while people like us might get excited about this, there are going to be a lot of sheeple that are fast asleep that are going to go through a rapid enlightenment and an awakening period. And this is going to be probably very, very scary for them. So I guess we have to be very gentle and careful and tender with a lot of these people. They're going to need guidance and support, because it's going to fry their brains.
You're right about that, Michael, because it's going to be a huge culture shock for a lot of people, because the earth is going to heal itself, and that magic we spoke about is coming back. And the people who
Yeah.
don't believe in it are going to have a real issue about trying to balance this out. So yeah, it is it's a big issue. My elders are telling me this day is coming. And it's funny. I hear it from elders. I hear it from elders all over the country. I hear from people just that have nothing to do with just are sensing. They feel like I can feel the change, but I can't put my finger on what it is. It just feels like it's coming. Well, it is.
Yeah.
And
it's because the change, I suspect it's because the change is so vast and it's so complete. Because you can't just have change and transparency and truth in one area, because that the rest of it is still completely hidden. And we can't find cures for disease and cures for or solutions for energy and 0 point energy and infinite tapping into the infinite source of energy if we don't know who we are, where we come from, and what the universe around us actually looks like, and still believe the lies of NASA and what they're telling us about what's out there, when most of it is most likely a complete lie and deception and science fiction. So it's a holistic solution for all the problems, not just some of the problems, because then the lies just continue and the ignorance and naivety of humanity keeps being perpetuated, and that needs to stop. So the cleansing of our mind and subconscious is going to have to be complete and total, to open our minds to what I call the terrible truth, which will bring the enlightenment.
Yeah, it's going to be a mixed bag for some people, and that's to an extent the reason why I want to really sort of recommend to people they find out about someone like Kano and find out really what we are capable of. I mean, some of the stories we could tell you about things he's done, I still have an issue with it. We're really lucky because we actually dealt with a person who could break all the laws of magic and all the laws that we think are normal laws about science. He did some ridiculous things that were impossible, but they weren't. And he smiled about them all the time, didn't he? I mean, he was one person. It was funny. People always say, when Kano turned up, why don't you look him in the eyes? They found out, didn't they? I've never met anyone, when they look you in the eyes, Michael, it's like you've been stripped naked. He looks at you and smiles at you, and it looks to me like he's saying, I just read everything you've ever done, and there's no secrets. And it was funny because when he turned up at our place, no one would look at him, would they? No one.
Then when he looks at you, you just kind of like, okay.
You don't look at Kano. No, but you're right. What he was actually old way complete in every way. In fact, I've got another elder we're going to put up, and she said the same thing. This guy dripped of the old way of doing things. And that's what's coming back. That's what's coming back.
Yeah.
Tribal way of living, ladies and gentlemen, it was the best way we ever lived. Nothing beats it, because when you're in a tribe, you're in a unit that works as one. No one's better than anyone else. We all work as one. And what that gives, it gives people satisfaction, because people are basically tribal. Most people want to be with other people. Let them do it without fear, and it brings the best out of them. When they do it with fear, it brings out the worst. Yeah.
Well, exactly. People participate in tribes all the time, but they don't necessarily recognize it as a tribe. If you play a sport, your team is your tribe.
Yeah.
You have your family is your tribe, your immediate family, and then and then the tribe stops. If you go to church, your church congregation is your tribe. If you if you go to a favorite restaurant of yours, and there are a bunch of regulars that go to the same restaurant all the time, that's your tribe. So we segment ourselves into tribes all the time, but we just don't recognize it like that.
We don't, no, and we need it. That's why we don't get it. We really do need it. We need that.
Well, it's because what it is that you willingly go to a place where you interconnect or connect with people that resonate with your thoughts, with your ideas, or with your vision, and so you resonate, and there's a resonance. And we use the word of resonance and frequency and vibration all the time. When you walk into a room and it says, "Oh, I went to this party. There was just such a bad vibe. I left." So what you just said, the word vibration. There was a bad vibration. So you were not on the same vibration to have coherent, resonant vibe, sympathetic vibration with the energy at the party. So it didn't feel good. So you left. And that same goes you meet somebody, when you work in an environment, everything in our lives is to do with sympathetic vibrations. And if it's not sympathetic, if it's in dissonance and not coherence with us, we don't vibrate with it, and we feel sick or whatever, and we don't want to be part of that. So this is it. So the cleansing of the world, the sharing the truth, sharing the knowledge and information, and the One Small Town strategy and the plan of action brings us back to a tribe of our choice, where you can choose to live in whatever town, and the energy and the vibration and the thought process of the people in that town vibrates and resonates with your own strategy and your own belief systems and your own vibration. So it's a very beautiful thing. So we literally are going back to these small tribal communities where people live in a community of their choice, and not where they're forced to live. And all stuff will come out. And most of us today, if you think about what's happened in the world today, most of us are forced to live in places because of socioeconomic circumstances and conditions. Most people live in places not because they choose to, but because they happen to have a job in that place. People will live in a city, and they live in Sydney, but they lose their job, and they look for a job, they can't find a job, and they suddenly find a job in Melbourne, so they uproot their family and move to another city, not because they want to live in the other city, but the socioeconomic conditions force them to uproot their families and go somewhere else. And that's all going to stop once the One Small Town scenario and plan of action becomes real, and people can choose to go to any town of their choice because of the climate. Some people like to live on the beach, some people like the mountain, like to live in the desert, some people like to live in the snow. Not, people are different. There are as many preferences for climate as there are people. And that's going to be a beautiful thing to see. Once we launch the One Small Town thing, once it starts to create this domino effect around the world, and people realize that they can choose to move to any town they want to live in, that they want to be there. Not only are their hearts happy, their family is happy, they're happy, they wake up with a smile on their face, they can go contribute towards the greater benefit of that community on a daily basis and a weekly basis, while they are able to explore and share their natural skills and talents with the entire community. What an incredible opportunity for people to create, to invent, to manifest. We have never seen a world like this, and I think that maybe we've had to go through thousands of years of all this turbulence, literally thousands of years since the very origins of humankind and this planet. We are now the ones that we've been waiting for. I believe we're the ones, through all those trials and tribulations and the torture and the mayhem and the wars, we've now realized how not to ever repeat that again, by creating these small towns of abundance and prosperity where everybody can participate. Everybody can have anything they choose. Anything you choose can be yours once you live in this one small town of your own choice. It is quite spectacular. I believe that once we go down this road, we are never, ever going back where we came from.
We couldn't, because we'd know what we left behind was appalling. And a lot of people are getting that now, Michael. You're right. And I think that COVID virus, when a lot of people spend some time at home with their family, I saw changes in people that would have never come out any other way, because they started to realize that what they were doing was crap, really horrible. And now they're starting to live like people again. Because what had happens, I remember about 4 years ago, I've used this thing quite a few times. I remember sitting in a train 4 years ago in Melbourne, and it was 4 carriages all opened up. There was about 200 people in there, and there wasn't one conversation in the train. Everyone had their electronic buttons and they were pressing them. And I looked around and thought, this is awful. There's slaves going.
It's terrible.
Humanity. And it was funny because I was with Binner and we were lost. And we didn't know what train we were on, and we didn't know where we were going, which is normal. And then some people put down their machines and started talking to us and telling us where to go. And there was a conversation going on around us. I thought, this is a bit better. And I thought that was really nice. And they all put their machines in, they were chatting to each other, they were telling us where to go. You're going to have to get off there, do that. And we did. And as I got off the train and I glanced back, and all of those people have got their machines back and they were pressing them again, and no one was in conversation. And I looked in that train, I thought, those people have lost their humanity. They're now robots. They're slaves that go to work each day and they go back, and then when they get home, they lock up their house because they don't want people coming in because they're fearful I'll steal something. And they go back the next day, and you call that living. It's not. You are existing, but you're not living. You're surviving, but you're not living. And what you're talking about, we should live, and there should be joy in our life. There isn't much anymore. They've taken it away.
And so it shall be. So it shall be. It is coming.
That's a good way to finish that
I
one.
like that. Yes.
All right, let's do the ring next time. That was a good talk, mate. I appreciate that. Yeah, let's be positive because the world is going to get better. That's what people have got to believe. And, you know, to an extent, if it's going to get better, this is the rule. If something's going to get really good, it's got to go to the bottom of the pit first. You've got to see it. You've got to see how horrible things are. And you've got to see, look around and say, what are our leaders doing now? We got a place where we were told you wear masks, you don't wear masks, you can wear masks, you might wear masks, you've got to be this far apart. But if you're playing football, you can tackle each other. It just doesn't make sense. What they tell us every day is rubbish. And they make up numbers. They make up lies about how many people have got this and how many people haven't. And they are trying to make us so fearful and so petrified that we just become basically walking dead. And we can't do that.
Yeah.
We've got to become alive again.
Well, we're changing all that, and I'd like to leave the viewers on a positive note. So we can talk about your rings, which I'm really keen to hear about.
Yeah, we'll do that
in our next chat.
Yeah, we'll do that next time. I've got all the science for that, and I've got absolute proof about Atlantis and Lemuria, but let's do that next time. We've done enough for today. We don't want to go too long. It's been a good talk, and then we'll leave that, and we'll come to that next time, mate. But yeah, well,
Fantastic.
Right now, carrying's very important. We're going to lose it. We're going to lose it. The problem is, and I'll close with this, we've got to fight the original Lands Council. It's an Aboriginal Lands Council want to develop it. They've caught the whitefella disease of money and greed. Well, it's not a whitefella disease. It's a disease of humanity. Money is a good thing. It can be a wonderful thing. Don't think that money is evil. It's the people who use it wrong. They're the mistake, not money.
Yeah, well, I'm going to have to agree to disagree with you there, because I've been teaching for many years that money itself is actually the black magic tool that actually causes the problems.
Yeah,
people say money, like a lot of people have the opinion that say, like you said, money is not the problem, it's just an energy exchange. But unfortunately, that's not true. It's the presence of money. It's the presence of money that actually creates all the problems we face in the world today. From the very first time that the idea and the concept of money was first introduced to humanity, some 1,000 years ago, till today, it's the presence of this thing called money that causes all the chaos, the devastation, the crime, and the unspeakable human behavior that so many people do because of money. So the sooner we can create an environment in which we no longer need to use money, the sooner we create that. And that's what One Small Town does. One Small Town is going to do that. Not immediately, but One Small Town creates that platform in which money is no longer needed. While we are making so much money and using and becoming so successful in our endeavors in our town, we don't have to use that money. And that's when people realize we don't need money. We need each other. And slowly but surely, that money will disappear.
That's a good way to finish. We do need each other, Michael. If we don't have each other, we're lost. Yeah, you're right. All right.
All right, guys. Well, until next time,
Definitely.
have a great time under. Keep Byron Bay alive and happy and healthy. And I'll catch up with you very soon again.
All right, mate. And the same for you. Look after yourself. And great talking to you as always, mate. And yeah, let's keep doing it. It's good fun. I enjoy this. Excellent. Thanks, mate.